Hey everybody, Brad Geiger here, and we're trying something new here at webcomics.com, kind of a video cast, vidcast, podcast. I don't know what we're going to call it yet. I don't know where it's going to go, but I like the idea of doing something a little bit different than the usual text post. And where I'd like to start out is taking a few questions and answers and see where this goes. So do hit the comments, tell me what you think of this. But we're trying something new. And I put out the call for some questions on the site, and I got a couple real good ones that are worth talking about. So let's dive right into it. First question says here's something I always wanted to ask every comic professional who came up through webcomics. Do you still regularly read other webcomics as much as you used to? I've heard a few other creators say they no longer have the time to read other comics. I can certainly understand being busy with multiple projects, being your own business manager, etc. But as an aspiring comic who makes comics online because he loves comics online, this is a depressing thing to hear. If this is true of you, can you address whether not reading other webcomics has affected your output, your relationship with the community, or motivation? That's a great question to start out with. And I'm going to give you several answers because it's not an easy question to answer. It sounds kind of cut and dry, and there are actually about two or three ways that life kind of influences that. So I'm going to give you a series of answers. Here's the top level answer. And the sad truth is I don't read nearly as many webcomics as I did when I was starting out. I remember back in 2001, 2002, I had a bookmark list that had easily about 25, and sometimes up to 50 different titles that I was checking in on a daily basis. Some of these were syndicated, some of these were webcomics. They were all online, and it was my kind of morning cup of coffee time that I would read through all of these comics. This is back when I was on KeenSpot. I don't read a fraction of that anymore. There's no way I read that much stuff on the web nearly to the same extent. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the way everyone has started consuming media has changed, and I've talked about that a number of times. I think we don't bookmark things. We don't go out looking for things. I've spoken before about back in the day, webcomic readers were hunter-gatherers. They'd go out and hunt for things, they'd gather it, and then they'd consume it. And now we're much more like somebody sitting by a stream. Everything comes flowing past us in our various social media outlets, and we just kind of sample from the stream. That's good news for webcomics because it means that having that daily update isn't nearly as important as it used to be. It means you can just kind of count on somebody catching you the next time down the stream and then coming and binging on what they find. But as a reader, my habits are very different. Why is that? Number one, just in general, you hit the nail on the head. I'm too busy. There's no way I can do the number of things that I do and be a good dad, be a good husband, and have any kind of sanity. Long ago, and having kids will do this to you if you don't have them already, long ago I found out that I didn't need as much sleep as I thought I did. I started maximizing my daylight hours around about the time I had my first kid. That kind of turns you into a little bit of a warrior. But even then, I've compressed my sleep schedule and expanded my daytime schedule, and there's still not enough hours in the day to do everything that I want to do. And then to do the things that have to be done, the things that you'd like to get done, and the stuff that you want to get done. Yeah, and there's a difference between all three of those. So, number one, you're absolutely right. Not enough hours on the day. Number two, so I supported Dave Kellett's Kickstarter for his Drive book, the hardcover, and it collected, I think, 2 years? 2 years of stuff? I had never read Drive. Dave's one of my closest friends. Love him like a brother. Never read Drive. Heard all kinds of good things about it. got the hardcover, and I realized why I was hearing so many good things about it, because it's a freaking awesome, it's a fantastic series. It's a great book. And I found, and it hit me like a brick. I don't really like reading comics on the web. At least, certainly not long form. For me, as a person, for me. And I don't enjoy the experience. I poured through the book. I barreled through it. I couldn't put it down. But reading it on on weekly updates or daily updates, whatever it updates, I can't read a page and then come back 24 hours later and read the next page. That's not a good experience for me. And I don't think it's a good experience for anybody. That's why I'm so happy to see webcomics changing, especially where long-form comics are concerned. I've said it before, but I love repeating myself. If you're doing comics the way we did them in 2005, if you're putting up a page at a time, you're doing it way wrong. Nobody wants to read that. You've got to change your approach. And I like reading a book. I don't like reading a page and then waiting 24 hours or a week or what have you. It's not a great reading experience for me. So I tend to avoid it and then support the books when they come out. That's just how I read. And now I'll tell you the dirty truth. This is the thing. The first two things are true. They're absolutely true. But there's a third thing that's also true. And you will not get anyone to ever tell you this truth, but it's also a truth. And that is this. I don't ever talk about reading webcomics or broach that subject, because the next question that inevitably gets brought up, like if I'm at a comic convention or something like, or doing an interview, the next question that comes up is, which webcomics do you read? What do you read? What do you like? And I know so many of these people, and it's safe for me to say Dave Kellett, because you guys know we've done projects together ad infinitum. We've done conventions together, we've exhibited together, we've done books together. It's safe to say Dave. If I go much further than that, like Dave, Scott Kurtz, obviously you know I've done a ton of work with him as well, and Chris Straub. If I start making a list, inevitably I'm going to leave someone off that list. And if I leave somebody off the list and hurt their feelings, then it creates a bad kind of atmosphere. So, and I know a lot of people, you don't kick around comics for as long as I have without running into and knowing a lot of people. And they're all nice people. But for the most part, every last person I've met in comics, I've found something to like about them. You know, some of them you've got to look a little harder than others, but I like a lot of these people. I genuinely like most of them. I don't want to hurt their feelings. And if you start making a list, just by definition, if you make a list, you automatically definitively leave people off that list. And those people get their feelings hurt. So I never get into the subject. It's much safer for me to say I don't read webcomics. I don't read as many webcomics as I used to, because that is true. There's truth to that. Absolutely. But the one thing that nobody else will tell you, and I guarantee you, everybody else is dealing with this same thing. You don't start listing things, because when you list them, you leave somebody out, and that hurts people's feelings, and nobody wants to hurt people's feelings. Yeah, that's, we're all cartoonists. We're all, and you gotta forgive the Grandpa Geiger glasses here, but I am getting old. But you can't go too far in this business without finding people that you really like. And, so that's why I don't like, it's so much easier for me to say, I don't read as much as I used to, blah, blah. It's hard. It's a hard life, blah, blah. But that's the other truth too, because I know how this goes. Next thing you know, they're going to say, which do you read? And if I start listing things off, it's a bad thing. So thank you for your question. That was a great one. Here's another one that came in through webcomics.com. And boy, can I relate to this. I've been doing the same comic for 14 years. For the last 5 years, so that's about a third of the time that he's spent. For the last 5 years, I've had a dwindling interest in making comics. I made the decision to bring the comic to a close this year. I feel my lack of interest in comics is due to feeling burned out on this one series. Now, here's the interesting thing. What do you think his question is going to be? Listen to what I just told you. He's been doing this for 15 years. A third of that, he's had a dwindling interest, all right? And he feels that his lack of interest in comics in general is because of his feeling burnt out on this one series. What do you think his next question is going to be? Surprised me. I didn't expect this to be the question. Here's the question. How do you handle the occasional burnout? My friend, you are not dealing with occasional burnout, and your problem isn't occasional burnout. I'll answer your question, but then we're going to get into a deeper issue there that you're missing. You're asking the wrong question, okay? Everything that I read, you're asking the wrong question. So I'll do you, in case I'm wrong, maybe I'm full of shit. It happens. I'll answer the question that you asked, but I think it's the wrong question. How do you deal with the occasional burnout? Well, listen, creativity on demand is very, very tough. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Charles Schulz famously said that that writer's block is for amateurs, and he's right. He's right. Writer's block is for amateurs. If you're doing this at a professional level, you don't have the luxury for waiting around for an inspiration to strike. You've got to make creativity happen. And there's a lot of ways to do this. And you know, you can find all kinds of helpful suggestions wandering around the web. But and some common idea starters are just to take a couple of random topics and throw them together and start examining how they work together. For example, here an example would be taking the cast from The Wizard of Oz and putting them in an airport. Okay, it's just two random things, and then start thinking about, okay, what are the different, you know, is the Cowardly Lion afraid to get on the plane? Did the Tin Man have trouble getting through security? Stuff like that. You can start to examine and explore that kind of stuff. But the kind of burnout that you're talking about runs a little bit deeper than that. So I got to be honest with you. I could talk about basic burnout for another 15 minutes. But you're talking about, I don't know, let's call it existential burnout. Why am I doing this? I haven't enjoyed it for a third of the 15 years is a long time to be doing something that you didn't enjoy for the last 5 years. Question is, why are you doing it? Let's examine that for just a little bit, okay? Why are you doing this thing you're not enjoying? Well, if you've been doing it 15 years, then you're probably old like me, okay? And I'm going to make a few assumptions about you, okay? Sorry, I got to assume. Here's a few things that I think that might be happening. If you're doing it 15 years, you're probably somebody that remembers newspaper comics, okay? And you're probably somebody that kind of, like me, took a look at that syndicated model, and when you were a kid, that's what you thought you wanted to be, was a syndicated cartoonist. And what's the one thing, at least from our perspective, what's the one thing that all those syndicated cartoonists had in common? It wasn't true, by the way, but it was the reality we were presented with. They had one property, and they ran that property for decades. Charles Schulz did Peanuts for decades. Bill Watterson did Calvin and Hobbes for decades. All of the, but we don't know, you know, we're never presented with those flops, or the apprenticeship that Jim Davis did at Tumbleweeds. You know, that we just see Garfield. We don't see those years that he apprenticed. You know, and we don't talk about U.S. Acres, by the way, for some reason. But we are presented with this idea. In comics in general, we're presented this idea of you do one successful thing and you run it forever. And the fear there is if I stop doing this thing, will people follow me to the next thing? And will the next thing be as good? And there's about 100 other questions that enter your mind when you start thinking about stopping the comic that you started. All of which are rooted in insecurity and fear, and you cannot let those things run your decision making. All I need to hear are those first two sentences. I've been doing this for 15 years and I haven't enjoyed it for 5. Then stop doing it. Why are you doing it? All right? It's time to stop. And by the way, not bring it to a casual, not bring it to a convenient close, not give them a farewell. Stop it now. Start working on something else. All right? Put it on hiatus. And if that turns into a permanent hiatus, fine. Find the thing that you'd rather be doing. Okay? If you can bring your comic to a close within a few months, if you feel, well, I've got some readers who are invested in this and they'd be mad at me if I just stopped working on it. Okay, I get that. So bring it to a close as quickly as possible. And then put it on hiatus. And if that turns into an infinite hiatus, so be it. And start finding the thing that rekindle your love for comics. If you do it well, if you do it right, you should be able to point the readers from your old project to your new project. You should be able to redirect that traffic. If you're doing good social media, it should be a no-brainer to bring the old readers to the new project. But all of that to the side, who freaking cares? If you're not loving this comic, if you're not feeling it, you're not doing a good comic. I guarantee you, you're phoning it in. All right? This new comic, if you can find something to love about it, and by the way, this new comic, maybe it's not a comic. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a short story. Maybe it's a novel. Maybe it's learning a musical instrument. Maybe it's building a shed in your backyard. This new comic might not be a comic. Find the thing you love. And if you need to take a year off, I just got done suggesting this to somebody on Facebook who came to me for advice. He'd been doing something. He says, I'm not getting anywhere with this thing, and I'm not feeling it. I said, fine, stop it. Do something else. Find your thing. And I said, just like a comic is a relationship. And I said, just like any other relationship, you should take a little time to self-assess. You should take a little downtime. And I'm talking months. Take some time and just stop doing anything creative, and cocoon yourself creatively. Let yourself let yourself grieve the old process or the old project. Let yourself grieve that old thing and kind of renew yourself by not doing anything creative for a little while. Rekindle, recharge. Go find something. Go live your life. Go live your freaking life for a couple of months. I guarantee you'll come back with all kinds of stories to tell. Part of the problem is some of us get so busy doing comics, we forget to live our lives. And that's where the stories come from, is from the life you've led. Go, get out of the house. Live some life, all right? And then you'll come back with stories to tell. I guarantee it. It can't not happen. And again, that new thing might not even be a comic. Might be a shed. And I'm not being facetious. It might be just something you build with your two hands just to see it standing out, weathering the storm. Take some time to cocoon a little bit. All right, you don't have to be doing a comic for the next couple months. Go out and live your life. When you come back, your readers are going to be there, and if not, there's going to be new ones to replace them. Where do you think you got those readers? You didn't start out with all those readers. You built them up. So you're going to build up your new audience, and you're going to have a head start over anyone who's starting fresh, because you're going to have a certain amount of people who remember you. You're going to have a certain amount of social media following. You don't lose that head start, but let's say you lose 70% of them. There's new people coming to the web every day. You got new readers. There's an infinite supply of readers. You'll get yours. And here's the secret. If you do a great comic, one that you're really invested in, if you do something that you all of a sudden are charged up about, guess what? That's going to be a truly great comic if you apply the stuff that you learned over 15 years of doing this. If you've been paying attention at all for 15 years, you apply the stuff that you learned, and now you're doing something that you're passionate about. You're going to get more readers, because readers are they gravitate towards good work and passionate work. All right? Guaranteed. Guaranteed. You don't have to worry about losing your place in line. I get that's a concern. That's a concern. But I don't know that that's something that in today's internet is as drastic as it was maybe 10 years ago. I think you can take a little bit of time and come back and start spinning that wheel again, start cranking that engine. But for somebody who's been doing this for 15 years and hasn't enjoyed it for 5, the answer is not how do you deal with burnout. That's bigger than burnout. This is existential burnout. This is why am I even doing this burnout. That's more than, here's 5 tips to better creativity, which I'm sure you can find probably on this site, probably on webcomics.com, probably anywhere you can Google that and find all kinds of helpful. And listen, those kinds of tips are good when you're working on a story and you just can't find the little spark there. But this is bigger. This is why am I doing this? And the answer to that question is, yeah. Why are you doing that? You probably shouldn't. You should probably bring it to a close if you truly feel that way, and have the bravery to step off the merry-go-round for a little while, recharge, and come back on your own terms. It's my thoughts, at least. So, like I said, this is something that we're trying new, something that I don't know how far we're going to go with it. I'm going to see how it works. Probably put it out as a vidcast, as a podcast. You guys tell me what you think, and maybe we'll make this a regular thing here at webcomics.com. My name is Brad Geiger. Webcomics.com is a site that I've been running since 2010 with regularly updated posts, tutorials, advice, all kinds of information for the independent cartoonist. If you like it, you can try it out for $5 a month, or you can get a year subscription for $30 consecutive months. And that goes for 12. Like if you sign up in March, it ends in December. You go to the next month. Somebody asked me that the other day. I'm like, no, it's 12 consecutive months. So webcomics.com, check it out. Brad Geiger, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.